Today we will be discussing box plots. Box plots are graphical summaries using numerical descriptors of position. With box plots, we use the 5-number summary to create them. The minimum, which is the smallest value of the data set, Q1, which is a quarter below or 3/4 above, and is the 25th percentile. The median, which is half below, half above, the 50th percentile. Q3, which is 3/4 below, a quarter above, which is the 75th percentile. And our maximum value, the largest value of the data set. Modified and non-modified box plot. A non-modified box plot is the regular box plot that you have been using when you first started drawn box plots. That's where you have the whiskers in the box. A modified box plot displays outliers as isolated points. The whiskers show the smallest and largest non-outliers. Within a box plot, we have an interquartile range. This is a measure of the dispersion of the middle 50% of the data. It's the spread of the box. To find the interquartile range, it's Q3 minus Q1, or the upper quartile minus the lower quartile. In order to find an outlier, you have the outlier rule. It's an observation is an outlier if it is beyond Q3 plus 1.5 times the IQR, that's on the high side, or Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR, that's on the low side. Let's look at an example. The frequency table shows the heights in inches of 130 members of the choir. With this, we are going to find the median and IQR. We're going to find the mean and standard deviation. We're going to display these data with a histogram and write a few sentences describing the distribution. I added, when we did this, a couple of things on finding the 5-number summary using our calculator and also displaying these data using a box and whisker plot or a box plot. So if you have a calculator, take it out now so that you can follow along. You may pause the video at any time so that you can catch up. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to enter the heights into list 1 and the frequency into list 2. To get to your list, you would go to the Stat key and choose Edit. Go to Stat, Calc, and choose one variable statistics, since we only have one variable here. Your list should default to L1, and for your frequency list, it's probably at a 1 right now. Change that to L2. To get L1 and L2, you'd press the 2nd and the 1 key and the 2nd and the 2 key respectively. Once you press enter, you should get your one variable statistics. Your number should look like this if you put the data from the frequency table incorrectly. We're going to go through and state the numbers that we're going to use for this problem. X bar is the mean. SX is the sample standard deviation. That's what we're going to use when we talk about the standard deviation right now. Min X is the minimum. Q1 is the lower quartile. MED, med, is the median. Q3 is the upper quartile. And max X is the maximum. Also here, N is the number of subjects that you have, just to make sure that you put everything in correctly. So now we're going to make a box plot. Go to Stat Plot, turn Plot 1 on, choose Box Plot, which is this one here. Your X list should default to list 1, and your frequency list should be list 2. Go to Zoom and choose number 9, Zoom Stat. Your box plot will show up, but we want to change the x-axis to have more of a reasonable scale. Since the minimum is 60, I set the min on our x-axis to 55. Since the maximum is 76, I set the maximum on our x-axis to 80, with the scale of the x-axis being 5. I changed the y-axis, but this is not necessary. Doing that, I can easily tell what my x values are since the minimum's at 60 and the maximum's at 80, and these go by 5s. So right here, this would be 65, and my min, or this would be 55, and my min would be 55 here. Now let's make a histogram. Change the type to histogram under your stat plot. Choose Zoom 9, which is Zoom stat again, and your histogram will show up like this. However, we're going to have to change the scale of the X and Y axes to get a better picture of this. When you go, I changed the minimum to 55, the max to 80, and I had a scale of 1 because we had our inches divided into 1-inch increments. So each bar should be a scale of 1 inch. Since my frequency needed to include 20 or 22, I think, I did my Y max of 25. Your minimum is going to be 0 since you cannot have a negative frequency. Doing this, my bar chart changed to look like this, which is a better description of my histogram and the data. Let's go ahead, find the median and IQR, find the mean and standard deviation, display these data with a histogram, and write a few sentences describing the distribution. So we already did a histogram, but we're going to go through and talk about this here. The first thing I'm going to do whenever I have a problem where I have to maybe find a box plot or talk about the IQR is I write down my 5-number summary. So here I have my 5-number summary. Minimum 60, Q1 65, median 66, Q3 70, and maximum 60. A, my median is 66. To find my IQR, it would be 70 minus 65, which equals 5. So the spread of the middle 50% of my data is 5. B, my mean, is 67.12 inches. My standard deviation was 3.79 inches. C, display the data with a histogram. So I have the histogram here. Also, I have my box plot. Notice my minimum values line up and my maximum values line up. Also, my median falls in between here. Okay. And write a few sentences describing the distribution. The distribution of the heights of the choir members is bimodal, probably due to the differences in height of men and women, and skewed slightly to the right. The median is 66 inches. The distribution is fairly spread out, with the middle 50% of the heights falling between 65 and 70 inches. There are no gaps or outliers in the distribution. Now go to the Google form in the week of September 28th module and complete the 50 Nifty United States survey. This needs to be completed before class on Tuesday or Wednesday of this week.